What if I told you that the FIA just discovered something on Lewis Hamilton's car that doesn't fit, right on the same weekend where Charles Leclerc blew up that same Ferrari like it was unstoppable? Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Because this isn't just a technical report, it's a revelation that could completely change what we believed about the SF26, about Ferrari, and about who is really understanding this car in 2026. The FIA publishes the results after analyzing Hamilton's car in the Miami Sprint, and what they find not only raises doubts, but also leaves Leclerc in a completely opposite position within the team. The question is clear: are we seeing a hidden problem in the car, or a difference that could mark the future of Ferrari this season? It all begins in Miami, on a weekend that was already full of tension after a 5-week break in the season. A point where the teams arrive with decisive developments and where any detail can completely change the hierarchy on the track. Ferrari appears on the scene with a brutal declaration of intent, 11 updates to the SF26, the most aggressive package of the entire grid, a total commitment to redefining its performance in 2026. We are not talking about small adjustments, but about a deep reconstruction of the car, from the front aerodynamics to straight-line efficiency, through a weight reduction that alone already promises real gains per lap. In this context, the FIA makes a key decision that many overlooked, but that now makes complete sense, extending the only free practice of the weekend to 90 minutes. It was not a coincidence, it was a necessity. The teams needed to understand practically new cars, but above all, the FIA needed to observe, measure, and validate that everything that was arriving on the track complied with the regulations in an increasingly extreme technical scenario. And that is where this story begins to be built. From the first moment on the track, the sensations inside Ferrari are contradictory. On the one hand, Charles Leclerc comes out and sets the pace with authority, making it clear that the potential of the new package is real, that the SF26 has something different, something that can put them in direct contention. But on the other side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton begins to experience much more complex, less predictable behavior, as if the car did not respond in the same way despite being, in theory, exactly the same. And this is what sets off all the alarms. Because in Formula One, when two drivers from the same team experience such different sensations with a newly updated car, the problem does not stay on the track, is immediately transferred to the data, to the engineers, and in this case, directly to the FIA. It's not just a question of adaptation or driving style, it's a possible disconnect between expected and actual performance. The FIA then comes into play with a leading role. He decides to analyze Lewis Hamilton's car in depth after the Miami Sprint, not only as a routine check, but as part of a more detailed review due to the magnitude of the changes introduced by Ferrari. Key elements are examined: the new front wing design, ground behavior, downforce distribution, and how these affect the overall balance of the car. Meanwhile, within the team, the narrative begins to split into two completely different realities. Charles Leclerc represents the optimistic face, a driver who manages to extract immediate performance, who seems to understand the new concept and who validates, at least on the track, the work done in the factory. In contrast, Lewis Hamilton is in a much more delicate phase, trying to decipher a car that does not give him confidence, that does not clearly communicate its limits. And this is where this act takes on true narrative force, because what seemed to be simply a technical evolution of Ferrari begins to transform into something much deeper, a possible internal gap in the understanding of the car, a difference that not only affects performance, but could condition leadership within the team. The publication of the results by the FIA only intensifies this situation. It is not only about confirming that the car complies with the regulations, but also about indirectly exposing that there are elements whose behavior is not consistent in all conditions, and that in an environment as precise as Formula One, is enough to generate doubts, pressure, and above all, a new narrative that no longer revolves only around the car, but around who is capable of dominating it. The first thing to understand is that the FIA does not find a direct illegality, and this is key because it validates all the technical work of the team in terms of regulations. But that doesn't mean everything is fine. What the data actually reveals is much more uncomfortable. The performance of the SF26 is not consistent under the same conditions when the context of use changes, and especially when the pilot changes. This opens a very dangerous crack, because in Formula One consistency is practically as important as pure speed. In the specific case of Lewis Hamilton's car, the analyses begin to point out irregular behavior in aerodynamic management, especially in transition phases, curve entry, direction changes, and moments where the air flow over the new package that Ferrari, almost completely redesigned, should be more stable. but it is not. And this is where the problem becomes critical, because those same areas are where Charles Leclerc is making a difference on the track. This raises an inevitable question within the team. Does the car really perform better in a specific driving range? Because if the answer is yes, then Ferrari hasn't created a universally fast car. It has created a selective car. And that changes absolutely everything. Engineers begin to cross-reference data between both sides of the garage, comparing telemetry, steering wheel inputs, throttle management, and braking. And what they find is even more revealing. Charles Leclerc is exploiting exactly the areas where the new package generates more downforce, while Lewis Hamilton, with a more progressive style and greater sensitivity at corner entry, is exposing the weaknesses of the same concept. This is not a simple adaptation. It is a direct clash between driving philosophy and design philosophy. Meanwhile, the FIA, although it does not intervene beyond the report, makes it clear with its results that the car's behavior is within the legal margins, but also implicitly confirms that the performance is not linear. And that nuance is devastating because it legitimizes Ferrari's internal doubts without giving them a solution. From here, the pressure begins to grow on multiple levels. First, about Lewis Hamilton, because inevitably his performance comes under the spotlight, although the technical context explains much more than it seems. Second, about the team itself, because now they have to decide if they evolve the car towards a more balanced concept, or if they continue betting on a direction that, for the moment, clearly seems to favor Charles Leclerc. And this is the point where the conflict reaches its maximum tension. Ferrari has a fast car, but it does not have a neutral car. It has the potential to win, but also the risk of internal division if they fail to understand and correct this duality. Because in the end, the real problem is not what the FIA found, it's what it revealed. And that is much more dangerous than any sanction. And so we reach the point where everything stops being technical and becomes a decision that can set the course for Ferrari in 2026. Because after the FIA publishes the results and makes it clear that Lewis Hamilton's car is legal but inconsistent in its behavior, Ferrari can no longer hide behind the data. Now you have to choose. And that choice is much more complex than it seems. On the one hand, they have a car that, in the hands of Charles Leclerc, demonstrates real potential to fight at the top, validating all the aggressive development they introduced in Miami. A car that gains speed on the straight, that improves in downforce, and that, when it enters its ideal window, is simply competitive at the highest level. But on the other hand, that same car is exposing limitations when it leaves that perfect range, and that is where the structural problem that the FIA has exposed appears. Ferrari then faces its biggest dilemma: continue evolving a concept that already works for one of its drivers, or slow down and redirect development to build a more balanced car that allows both to perform at their best. Because they can't do both without compromising performance in the short term. And this is where the story takes an even deeper turn. If Ferrari decides to go for the current direction, it is implicitly consolidating Charles Leclerc as the central axis of the project, the driver who best interprets this new SF26. But if they decide to amend the concept to also suit Lewis Hamilton, then they risk diluting that immediate advantage they have found. It is not just a technical issue, it is a strategic decision, even a political one, within the team. Meanwhile, external pressure continues to grow. The narrative is already installed. Ferrari has a fast car, but not completely understood. And in a championship where every tenth counts, where every sprint limits the margin of reaction, this type of uncertainty can cost much more than points. It can cost the fight for the title. The most critical thing is that this situation comes at the worst possible time. Miami was not just another race. It was the restart point of the season after weeks of intensive development. It was the place where Ferrari had to confirm its leap forward, and it has done so, but leaving a huge doubt in the air. Because in the end, it all comes down to one question that defines this final act. Has Ferrari built a winning car, or a car that can only win under very specific conditions? And that answer will not only determine what happens in the next races, but who will truly lead the team's future. The conclusion of this whole story is as clear as it is uncomfortable for Ferrari, because the FIA has not pointed out an infraction, but has exposed a truth that may be even more decisive. The SF26 is not a completely understood car. What started as a simple review after the 2026 Miami Sprint ends up revealing something much deeper. Lewis Hamilton's car complies with the regulations, yes, but it does not respond in the same way as Charles Leclerc's in similar conditions. And in today's Formula One, where everything is measured to the limit, that difference changes absolutely everything. Ferrari has taken a step forward, that is undeniable. They have built a car with more speed, more load, and more potential than before. But at the same time, they have created a car that demands extreme precision, that punishes any deviation from its ideal operating window, and that, at the moment, only one of its drivers seems to completely dominate. And therein lies the key to everything, because this situation will not be resolved solely with more laps or more adaptation. This forces the team to rethink its technical direction, to question whether the path they have taken is the correct one in the long term, or if they need to find a balance that does not exist today. And in the midst of that decision, something even more important is also defined: the internal hierarchy of the team. The FIA unintentionally has ignited a story that goes far beyond Miami. It has put on the table a silent conflict between performance and understanding, between potential and execution, between two drivers who represent two different ways of interpreting the same car. And now, Ferrari has to respond. Because in a championship where every detail counts, the fastest car doesn't win. The car that understands itself best wins. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.